I get to hang out with all of you as we experience today's service together. Whether you're here with us every week, this is your first time, or maybe it's a little bit of in between, today's a great day to be here because we're starting a brand new 2-week series called Ambushed. Have you ever fallen into a trap? I recently read about what's called the cutting edge trap. And what that is when we convince ourselves that we need things that we really don't need. Maybe we're envious of a new neighbor moving in down the street. We see this truck that we would just love to have. Or the kids run home and try to convince us that we need to buy the newest gaming console their friends have. Or maybe it's the envy we experience on Monday morning at work when a coworker is sporting the brand new iPhone that we would just love to have. If it's newer and it's better than what we have, we absolutely convince ourselves that we need to have it. Way back in 1976, the average retail store carried about 9,000 different items. Today, similar stores carry up to 100,000 different items. So some quick math will tell us that's an extra 91,000 things for sale. How many of those do you think are essential? And how many of those do you think are just extra? It seems that today our society is convincing us that we need to have so much more than we really do. So why is that? Well, today our lead and founding pastor, Mark, is going to help us start to answer some of those questions with this new series. One of the other things to know is that today we're going to be taking part in the sacred act of communion. So it'd be a great time right now to grab any kind of bread, any kind of crackers or juice that you may have around the house to join us in that part of today's service. If you're watching us on YouTube, please give this video the thumbs up. If you're watching us on Sunday morning at live.theridgecc.com, there's an online chat going on right now, and we would love for you to be a part of it. Well, right now, we're going to join Mark, but please make sure to hang around after to hear a bit from our band and take part in communion. Thanks for being with us.
I meant to take all this stuff to the thrift store last year, but I'm going to try and sell it to you anyway.
I'm going to stop you right there. I've seen like every episode of American Pickers, so I kind of feel like I'm an expert at antiquing.
Oh no, you're going to try and haggle with me, aren't you?
Yeah, but I'm really bad at it. Dollar amount that is insultingly low.
Dollar amount on the price tag.
Half of that.
Dollar amount on the price tag.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is walk around and pretend like I'm coming up with a better offer, but I'm gonna come back and pay sticker price.
These are way overpriced.
Sadly, they are. I paid $300 for that back in 1995, and I need to recoup some losses. Think of it as trickle-down bad judgment.
And why is that so expensive?
Oh, you mean this? This has only been used once, continuously from 1987 to 2011.
That's not how that works, and I really don't feel like you want to sell anything today.
You're right, I don't. I just got married, so now I have twice as much stuff, and my wife's stuff is better.
Yeah.
It worked. We got rid of some garbage, and we met a few neighbors we'll probably never talk to ever again. Please tell me we made enough money to justify sitting in our front yard all day while neighbors haggled over a $3 crock pot.
We did not.
Great. Let's do it again next year.
All right, hello everybody, welcome, glad that you're here. Want to say a special hello to all those who join us online as well. A few years ago, I was in the market for a car and I'm doing this national search, and I located a car, and it was at this dealership in Illinois. Immediately, I called the dealership and they lined me up with a sales rep who actually ended up being one of the sales managers. And so we started to negotiate on the phone, and we couldn't come to an agreement, and so we started to negotiate by text. And as we started to negotiate, there was a large gap between where he was and where I was. And so we're texting back and forth, and this is going on for about 2 weeks. And every time we text, it's shrinking. But I had locked into a price where I wasn't going to go above that. And so after about 2 weeks, I say, listen, this is the price. This is what I'm willing to pay. And he says, okay, you know what? you have a deal for that price, come and get your car. And so I hop in my car and I do the 90-minute drive to this dealership in Illinois, patting myself on the back for winning the negotiations, And so I get to the dealership, meet the guy, and he takes me out to where the car is, looking at the car, and looks fine and all that stuff. I said, okay, write it up for that price. And he goes, yeah, no, we're not going to write it up for that price. And I go, what do you mean you're not going to write it up for that price? Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. And so I take out my phone and I show him his text that says, you have a deal for this price. And he says, yeah, that doesn't really matter. Now, eventually, I left the dealership without my new car after almost turning into the Incredible Hulk. And unfortunately, I had experienced something that was all too common in car dealerships. I was ambushed. Now today, we are starting a very short series, it's going to be 2 weeks, that we are calling Ambush. And what we're going to do over the next couple weeks is we're going to look at this idea of ambushed. But we're going to look at it from a very different perspective. You see, we all know what an ambush is. This is something someone does to us. But the different perspective that we're going to talk about is that this is actually something we do to ourselves and we don't even know it. And the person that's going to help give us this different perspective of this idea of ambush is a guy named King Solomon. He wrote most of the book of Proverbs, which we're going to look at a passage in the book of Proverbs throughout this series. And if you don't know who King Solomon is, he's actually the son of King David. And the book of Proverbs, if you've never read it, you should read it. It's actually just a book of wise sayings. And so here's the passage that's going to drive our series for the next 2 weeks. Here's what Solomon writes. He said, if a bird sees a trap being set, it knows to stay away. And we're like, well, we hope the bird knows that. But these people, they set an ambush for themselves. He says they are trying to get themselves killed. Now, Solomon, who would try to get themselves killed? And he says, such is the fate of all who are greedy for money. And then he uses this phrase, it's pretty fascinating. Those who are greedy for money, it robs them of life. Literally, those who are greedy for money, it slowly chokes the life out of them. Now, I think for all of us, it's kind of obvious, and I don't think anyone would intentionally set an ambush for themselves. But what Solomon says here is so challenging for us, because he says, those who are greedy for money, they are the ones who set an ambush for themselves. And the reason why this is so challenging is because most people, I think almost all people, they don't think they're greedy. They don't see this idea of greed in themselves. I mean, they're just completely blind to it. In fact, if I said, hey, I want everybody to raise their hand who struggles with greed, I would bet that nobody would raise their hand. In all my years as a pastor, which has been about 20 or so, only one time has someone talked to me and said, I think I struggle with this idea of greed. In the New Testament, both Jesus and Paul use this very interesting word for greed. It's actually a compound Greek word. And here's what the Greek word is. It means wanting more-ishness. Isn't that great? Wanting more-ishness. I mean, I see that and I go, man, I just love that. I mean, have you ever wanted more-ishness? I mean, I have. Now, here's something that's going to blow your mind for some of you. Did you know that there was actually a time in history where people would buy things and then they would use them until they got broken? I know some of you are like, what? Why would you do that? I mean, why wouldn't you get something new? Or, why would you do all that? And here's another thing that might blow some of your minds. Did you know that there was a time in history that when things broke, that people actually tried to fix them so they could continue to use them? I know some of you are like, what was this? When did this ever happen, Last year, I had an iPhone 8, and my iPhone 8 was having what I call calendar issues. I would try to enter things in my calendar, and then it would just freeze, and then it would freeze up the whole phone, and so I'd have to do a reboot and do the whole thing and all that stuff. Now, let me just be really honest with you. I didn't try real hard to find out what the real problem was. And the reason why I didn't is because I really wanted a new iPhone, because I had an iPhone 8. And then what made it even harder for me is the rest of my family didn't really want me to figure out what the problem is because we're all on the same phone plan. And so they all had iPhone 8s, and so they figured if I get an upgrade, then they're going to get an upgrade too. There is something inside all of us that says, I need new even though I don't really need the new. It's like, well, I need a new car. Well, why? Because they have air conditioning seats now, if you can believe that. It's like, well, I need new furniture. Well, why do you need new furniture? Because my furniture is 8 years old. Well, does it still work? Yeah, but it's 8 years old. When my wife and I lived in California, and we lived in California before we moved here, we had bought a 1,400 square foot house, and it's all we could afford in California at that time. And so we had 2 kids, and we just had the twins and stuff. And let me just say this: 1,400 square feet. I mean, it was fine. I mean, no big deal and all that stuff. Well, then we move here, and we get a 2,000 square foot house for half the price. And so we move in, we're like, oh man, we're in a mansion. I mean, we are living in luxury. We have so much space. I mean, we can live here the rest of our lives. Well, so we're there for a couple weeks in this neighborhood, and we're talking to this neighbor that's moving. And this wasn't the only conversation we had but this is the first one we had. And our one neighbor is moving, and I'm like, is it because we moved in and all stuff? No, not because you guys moved in. It's just because we have a 2,000 square foot house, and we only have 2 kids. And we don't have enough room. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have enough room? They're like, yeah, we don't have enough room. We just bought a 3,000 square foot house. And we're like, what? And see, what we don't realize is that a big part of our life is the pursuit of stuff. And Solomon says, you just need to realize in that pursuit, you are actually ambushing yourself and you don't even know it. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about one of the remedies for this ambush. And what's great about this remedy is I've never talked to anyone who doesn't want to experience this remedy in their life. But the problem is we do the wrong things to experience it. And so here's the remedy that we're going to talk about. The remedy is this: contentment. And contentment, what does contentment mean? It just means completely satisfied. It's like saying, I'm good. Here's the interesting thing about contentment. When we think of contentment, we think that contentment is this place we get to in the future. And it's like, okay, if I just get that, or I buy that, or I get that promotion, all right, then I'm content. But here's the thing. That's not what contentment is. You see, what contentment is this. Contentment is a learned attitude, I'm going to come back in a minute, that we embrace not sometime down the road, but it starts with embracing it in the present. It starts with embracing it in today. Now, contentment is actually a learned attitude, which this is what makes it so challenging. I can't say, okay, everybody, I want you to leave here now, be content, message over, let's pray. You see, it's a learned attitude. And so if we're going to get there, here's what we have to do. We have to be willing to dig below the surface to figure out what is that ugly thing inside of all of us that constantly wants more-ishness. And so before we can experience contentment, we have got to be willing to go there. And I'm going to warn you, it's not really fun up front, but if we're going to learn it and we're going to experience it, we first have to diagnose the problem. So the question we need to ask is, well, what drives our greed? Here it is. Discontentment. Discontentment. Now, not all discontentment is bad. There's actually a good discontentment that motivates people to make the world a better place. I mean, personally speaking, okay, this is just me, all right, and I'm not putting myself on a pedestal on this, okay, so please don't hear me on that. But personally speaking, I firmly believe that the local church and God working through the local church is the only solution just for all the brokenness and pain and division and junk in our world. And I mean, I just believe that that's it. And so this is why we're not shy about challenging you to take next steps in your faith journey, and we're not shy about taking risks to launch new campuses and to create network of churches. But that's good contentment. Bad contentment is this whole thing that's connected to our stuff that Solomon says, if you're not careful, you can be ambushed by this. Let me ask you this. What do you need to have enough? What do you need where you go, you know what? I'm good. Don't need any more. There's been tons of studies of this throughout the years. I mean, a lot of them. And so thousands of people have been asked this in the studies. And here's the interesting thing. Do you know that the answer is pretty much the same no matter the income level? And do you know what the answer is? It's always a little bit more. And this makes complete sense because greed and discontentment are actually unsatisfiable appetites. I mean, just like our stomach, the more we feed it, the more the appetite grows. And so here's what happens. We get to this place where we go, I want this, and then we get what we want, and that's good for about a day. And then it's like, okay, now I need something else. And you know this, because how many of you have gotten to this place where you've said something like this: this is my forever house. And then 3 years later, it's like, yeah, that house looks a lot better over there. I think I want that house instead. How many of you have said, I'm going to drive this car into the ground. I mean, I love this car. And then it's a year later and the new car smell is gone, you know, and there's chips in the paint, and then the new model comes out and it's like, hey, I think I want that instead. How many of you at one point in your life, you said, if I ever make this amount of money, I mean, I will be completely content if I make this amount of money. And then you made that amount of money, in fact, you even more than that, and you're still not content. You see, it's this unsatisfiable appetite. This thing can never be quenched. So, if greed is driven by discontentment, well, then the logical question to ask is, well, where does that discontentment in our life come from? I mean, what's the root of that? One word, and we know this one word too well. Here's where it comes from: comparison. Here's what I have, and you compare it with what someone else has, and that awareness drives discontentment. Years ago, there was this fascinating case study that was done on this company, and this company built a manufacturing facility in this very remote part of Central America. And this place was so remote that people lived in huts, they hardly had anything. And so they hired all these workers, and they paid them, to us, what would be very, very little, but to them, it was a whole lot. And so these workers, they worked for this company for a week, and then they paid them after a week, and then the next day, something happened. Every single worker quit. And why did they quit? Because they had earned more money than they ever had made in their life. So now this company had a workers crisis. They were like, well, what do we do? You know, because we need these workers and all that stuff. And so a leader on the team came up with this idea. He mailed shopping catalogs to every worker's home. And within 1 week, every worker came back to work again. And do you know why that is? Because the workers began to compare themselves began to see what other people have. They became aware of what other people have, and they began to compare that with what they currently have, and this fueled some discontentment in them that they didn't realize they even had. Now, we hear that, and that sounds kind of dishonest, doesn't it? I mean, who would do something like that, you know? I mean, can you imagine, think about this, can you imagine living in a world where businesses knew what we didn't have, and they started to think what we think that they should have, and so they intentionally started to target us so that we would buy things that we didn't even know that we need. Can you imagine living in a world like that? And can you imagine living in a world where after we buy these things, that ads to similar things start getting sent to our social media accounts? And we're on these websites and we buy things, and all of a sudden this thing pops up that says products. People who bought this product also bought this product as well. I mean, can you imagine living in a world where that happens? How appalling is that? You see, what we don't realize is the more that we're aware of what other people have, the more that fuels discontentment in us. Now, let me tell you why that is. And most of us, we don't realize why this is. And that's because comparison, it always creates insecurities in us. And I want you to maybe kind of, as I talk about this, maybe think about a time where you've really experienced this and you know that this is true. Because it's like, they have something that I don't. And right when you begin to go there, there's kind of this feeling in your gut, that you feel. And it's like, okay, they have something that I don't. And, that's why their marriage is better off than my marriage. And that's why their family is happier than my family. It's because they have a remodeled kitchen, and I don't have a remodeled kitchen, And that's why he always seems happy, because he has a 2022 model and I only have a 2019 model. And their kids are so much better behaved than our kids, because they get to go to Disneyland every year for vacation. And we don't get to go to Disneyland. We'd be so much better off if we did. You see, that comparison just creates insecurity in us. Where does that insecurity come from? The root of that insecurity is born from a false identity. You see, our greed, our wanting more-ishness is really an identity issue. You see, we have bought into a huge lie. And if you were here last week, we touched on it a little bit, but here's the lie we bought into. Who you are is determined by what you have and what you look like, rather than who you are is determined by who God says you are. And this is why this is an ambush. Because for many of us, we're so unhappy and we don't realize it. And the reason why we're so unhappy is because we are placed our identity in what we have. And when that happens, your identity will never be secure. Because someone always has more. And so you go about living your life and you never feel peace. You always feel anxiety. You always feel that feelings of insecurity because you can never measure up, because there's always someone that has more. And so you go about your life and you're striving because you're always buying to keep up. And Solomon says, listen, that's an ambush. See, you have bought into a lie that's born in a false identity. Now, the good news is that Jesus actually talked about this. There was one time he said this to his disciples. He said this. He said, hey, watch out. Why would he say watch out? Because it's a trap. It's an ambush. He says, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. I find this kind of interesting because according to Jesus, there wasn't just one type of greed. There was many different kinds of greed. And then he makes this statement: life, your life, does not consist in an abundance of possession. Your identity is not determined by what you have. Listen, your identity is way more than that. A few years after this, the Apostle Paul came along and he took Jesus' words and he kind of expanded them a bit. And he said them in his own words. And here's what Paul says. He said, but godliness with what? Contentment is great gain. And so Paul was like, hey, godliness actually isn't enough. Doing what we know God wants us to do is important, but there's not enough. There's got to be more. There's got to be this idea of contentment. And then he gives us some perspective. He says this: for we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. Now, anyone have parents that have ever said that to them before? Any parent here ever say that to your kids? It's like, yeah, you didn't bring anything out of this, and you're not going to take anything, It's like, well, I'm not going to be around when, hopefully when I leave, but, we say it anyways. And so it's this idea of, okay, we didn't bring anything in, we won't take anything out. So in between, we have to learn this idea of contentment. And then he says, but if we have food and clothing, and I think he missed something, I think shelter too, he missed that one, but who am I to correct Paul? But if we have food and clothing, we'll be content with that. In other words, we get to this place where, you know what, that's enough. That's enough. And then he continues, those who want to get rich, they fall into temptation and an ambush, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destination. And the image that Paul is getting here is that it's like this idea, if we start falling off a cliff and we don't even know that we're falling off a cliff. And he says, for the love of money, not for money, but the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith. And he's echoing Jesus' words where he says, you can't love both God and money. They have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. And I would bet that we all know people who have destroyed their family, their marriage, even their businesses because of their pursuit of money. And what many of us don't do many of us don't take the time to look inward to realize that maybe we are actually doing the very, very same thing. And what many of us don't realize is that our marriage problems, our kid issues, our lack of peace and anxiety, the reason that they're there in our life is because we can't be content with what we have and where we are. In fact, there's a name for this, because they have a name for everything nowadays, you know? So there's actually a name for this. Here's what it's called: destination addiction. This addiction, here's what destination addiction is. It is, I can only be happy with the next. It's like the next promotion, the next pay raise, the next partner, the next house, the next upgrade, whatever the next may be. And so you just need to realize that if this is you, you will never be happy until you get rid of this whole idea of the next. And so if you follow Jesus and you want to experience the life that Jesus offers us, contentment isn't just something that's important, it's essential. Because in the New Testament, contentment carried this idea of sufficiency. You're enough even without the next. Money guru Dave Ramsey, I love what he says about contentment. He says this. He says, content people don't always have the best of everything, but here's what they do. They make the best of everything. And unless we get to that place, unless we embrace this idea, nothing we buy will ever make us happy. So at the core, discontentment and greed, they're identity issues. And so if you struggle with contentment, which most of us do, here's a question that you should ask yourself. And most people, they have never asked themselves this question. And that is, when you're going to buy something, what are you really trying to buy? What are you really trying to buy? I mean, on the surface, it's the product, but if you get below the surface, you are actually trying to buy something that will improve your identity and you don't even know it. What are you trying to buy? Maybe you're trying to buy something so you impress others. Maybe you're trying to buy power and prestige. Maybe you're even trying to buy your way out of loneliness. I love talking to high school students and even my own high school students, and everybody there wants to have the latest, you know, everybody does. And so they may not even like it, but everybody has it, and so, you know, they want it as well. And so if you have a little fun with them, and then you get them to the point where you say, why do you really want that? Here's what they'll say if they're honest. I just want to be accepted. And you know what? I can't tell you just the countless purchases I have bought and honestly have regretted. And you know what the bottom line is? Wasn't I really needed them? Wasn't even really wanted them. There was just insecurities in me that drove those purchases. So what we need to do then is we need to develop some action steps that will help us change our attitude and will help us give an attitude of contentment. And so I want to give you a few of these. And then I'm going to wrap it up by just giving you 2 challenges by keeping these 3 things in mind. Okay, so here's some things that will help us just change our attitude toward an attitude of contentment. Here's just some suggestions for you. I want to encourage you to see advertising for what it really is. Every advertisement we see is designed to make us feel like our life is not enough without that product. And so if we don't see behind that, we will constantly fall prey to advertisement. It's kind of like this. You know, I will never look like The Rock, and I want to look like The Rock, you know, if I don't drink this awful tasting protein shake, you know, I'll just continue to look like I am now. And ladies, you know this, it's like, I'll never look like her. Now, I don't know who her is because I don't keep track of her, but you know who her is, you know. You'll never look like her if you don't wear her clothing line, if you don't wear her perfume line, if you don't wear her jewelry line. Now, here's what I want to encourage you to do. Next time you're watching an advertisement and you just feel yourself getting sucked in, here's what I want you to do. I want you to say this out loud. I'm enough without you. Second suggestion I want to encourage you to do. Never impulse buy. Now, this is why right here, I don't do the grocery shopping in our house anymore. Now, I used to, and here's what would happen. So my wife, you know, she'd write the list out and all that stuff, and then, you know, she put like the aisle number in there and all that stuff to kind of help me out because I'm directionally challenged. And so I go to the store, and then I would find myself seeing things, and then I would just kind of get caught up in those things. And so, you know, I'm pushing the cart around, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Tony the Tiger. I haven't seen Tony the Tiger in like 30 years now. But man, that looks good. I need to start eating Frosted Flakes again. And so I would come home with Frosted Flakes, and what would happen? My emotion would start to get caught up, and as a result, I would start to buy things. And that's what happens with impulse buys. You know, we just emotionally talk ourselves into things. And so here are just a few things that we have done that have really helped us. In my mind now, we play by what's called the 24-hour rule. That if we're ready to impulse buy and our emotion is starting to talk us into something, we just give it 24 hours. And if you do that, here's what will happen. Most likely, for us, it's about 99%. Most likely, you won't feel the need to buy it anymore. The other thing that we do is we say we're going to run everything into the ground. Now, I talked about cell phones later. You know, if you have kids, they always want the latest technology. They want the latest phones. Here's what I tell my kids. I always say, if you buy a phone and you run it into the ground and then buy new, guess what you'll have? The latest. And you'll have saved a ton of money. Now, they don't like to hear that, okay, but I just tell it to them. Anyways, so never impulse buy. Final suggestion. Get in the habit of giving things away. Jesus said this, and most of you have heard this. It is more blessed to what? Give than to receive. Now, this wasn't just some advice for us. This was deep spiritual truth for us. So get in the habit of giving stuff away. Get in the habit of giving money away. You see, the more generous we are, the more content we will be. The two are very much tied together. Now, these are just 3 things. There's more than 3 suggestions, and these are going to be up on our social channels if you don't get these. But keeping these 3 things in mind, I want to leave you with 2 things I want you to do. And these 2 things are what I call high-level challenges. And the reason that these are high-level challenges is because greed and discontentment, we don't see these in our life. In fact, many of you are kind of going through this message, I don't struggle with this, I don't deal with this, I'm good with this. Listen, we are blind to these things. And so these need to be high level because these need to expose this ambush in our lives. And so I want to leave you with these 2 high-level challenges. And I hope you do it. Here's the first one. I want you to give away everything in your closet, kitchen, and garage you haven't used in the last year. Now, some of you are going, what? I'm like, yeah, that's what I want you to do. And the reason why I want you to do this is because unless you live below the poverty line, I want you to see. Now, most of you know this, but you don't see this and feel this. I want you to see that you really do have enough. I actually stumbled across this by accident a few years ago. I walked into my closet, and like the clothes rack that my clothes hang off of, all of a sudden one part of it was busted because the weight had gotten too much. And so I had an option. I could get a bigger clasp and put it on there, which I can't do, obviously. So that was option number 1. Option number 2 was I actually lessened the weight by getting rid of some of the clothes. And so I started to just kind of go through the clothes rack, and I'm emptying out clothes that I don't really need and haven't worn in a while. I had a pile up to about here, and I was just blown away at the number of clothes that I just didn't need anymore that could have been given away to other people. And then the next year we did our basement, and I was surprised at the amount of stuff there. And then we did our garage. And so we've been doing this every year. Now next year, I kind of have this rotation of shoes, running shoes and all that stuff. I'm going like, why do I have all these shoes here? And they're taking up all the space, and there are people in the world that need shoes. And so we've just started to do this, and it was difficult at first, and it's gotten easier, and here's what's happened. We've experienced more freedom, because we've realized there's so much stuff we don't need, and at the same time, we've started to experience more contentment in our lives. And so I want to encourage you to do this. And I realize some of you have dynamics in your house where like some of you are savers and some of you are senders, okay? And so this is going to create some dynamic, but listen, just have the conversation and meet each other in the middle somewhere. This might be, for some of you, the most transformative thing you do this year. Second thing I want to challenge you to do. I want you to take 1 week or 1 month, all depends on if you're a high achiever, okay? And then take a discretionary spending fast. And some of you are like, okay, whoa, what's that? What's that? Unless it's food or drink or something you need, you don't get it. Yeah, but I want, no wants for at least 1 week. Some of you are like, okay, Mark, are you saying that I have to take a week off of Amazon? That's exactly what I'm saying. And here's what I'm going to tell you in advance. You'll survive. And guess what? They'll survive without you too. And why do I want you to do that? Because I want you to begin to starve that monster inside of you. That I want more-ish monster. Now, I'll be honest with you, we've never done this before, Don and I. And so this is going to be some interesting conversation in our household. And you know what? I hope that once again, this might be challenging based on the dynamic of your household, but I pray once again that you would just wrestle with the tension of the conversation and invite God into this whole process and just see what God does as you do this. So 2 challenges, high-level challenges. And listen, you can do these challenges, we can do these challenges, and we need to do these challenges. Because contentment is something that we learn. And I tell you what, this is a very hard thing to learn. But as I always say to my kids, choose your heart. And the other option is you just kind of live your life acting as if nothing's wrong until one day you wake up and you realize you've been ambushed the entire time. And that is time and money you can't get back. That to me is a harder heart. This heart that I'm talking about might be a bit hard up front, but there's a benefit to this one. Listen, you'll have less, and you don't even need, you can make a difference with the less that you have. You'll feel freer, and in the process, you will begin to experience contentment. And so would you be willing to take the step and begin to embrace the attitude of contentment and not be willing to fall prey to an ambush that you might be setting for yourself? Let me pray for us. Father, as we talk about this whole idea of a self-inflicted, a self-set ambush, that's not something that we really think about. And when it comes to greed, I think our initial reaction is, well, that's not me, I don't deal with that. But God, that's what makes it the ambush. It's so sneaky, and we're so blinded to it. And so, Father, I just pray that we'd have open hearts, and even if we don't feel like we need this, I pray we'd be willing to step into these challenges. And we would just kind of go through our stuff and give stuff away. Pray that we'd be willing to just go on a discretionary fast. And God, just really to see what you do as we kind of step into this. We want to have this attitude of contentment. And so, Father, you want us to have this attitude of contentment, but it's not something we can just pray into our lives. It's something that we step into our lives. And so may we do that. May you continue to really just do something in us to get us to this place of contentment. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Have you ever fallen into the trap of discontentment? Maybe it's comparing ourselves to others, complaining too much, or that cutting edge trap that I talked about earlier today. What do you do to get out of falling into these traps? As Mark shared with us this morning, our prayer is that all of us can escape out of these traps so that we can be freed to focus on partnering with God with what he really wants us to do. And that's spread the hope of his son, Jesus. It's really a big deal. And oftentimes we just can't do that alone. So that's why we come together as the Ridge Community Church to gain each other an opportunity to spread that hope of Jesus throughout the world. But oftentimes it's also too big for us to do alone as a church. So we partner with other churches and organizations throughout the world to spread that hope. And one of the ways that we do that is through our campaign called Live Big. One time a year, we get together as a church and we give just a little bit of extra so that we can bless other churches and organizations with so much more throughout the next year. This year, we were able to gather nearly $250,000 to spread around the world. And one of our partners is City on a Hill. City on a Hill is located on the near west side of Milwaukee by Marquette. And what they do is they help to strengthen families by restoring hope and ultimately ending the cycle of poverty in the community that they serve. This year, we were able to bless City on a Hill with $15,000. With that $15,000, they are able to start a brand new program aimed towards youth ages 16 and older. And what they're going to do is they're going to take those dollars, invest them, and help these kids understand what life looks like after high school. Help them understand where they can go next and how they can develop skills to assist them in living in that community post-high school. That's how this community can ultimately end the cycle of poverty. It's a big deal, and we as the Ridge just couldn't do it on our own. Personally, I volunteered at City on a Hill for many years, and I've seen some amazing people having impact in amazing ways on the youth of that community being served. One of the ways that we're able to bless organizations like this is through the opportunity that people give to the Ridge each and every week to support the mission of helping people find the hope of Jesus in every corner of the world. You can give digitally by following the instructions that you see on your screen right now. We're going to take a moment now and bring our offering to God.
Who am I that the highest king would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last, he has ransomed me, his grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I'm chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Sing it out. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am.
I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am.
I am chosen, not forsaken.
Well, thanks again so much for just joining us in this way as we get to sing out these songs and just tell God how awesome he is. Hey, as a part of our worship, we're actually going to move into a time of communion. And on your way in, you should have gotten this little cup. It has a little juice in it with a little wafer on the top, actually. And if you're joining us online, go ahead and grab whatever you might have around the house that you can use to participate in communion with us. And you know, communion is this way to remember a little bit of what we were singing about in that first song, right? How God died for us, paying the penalty for sin that we deserved, but he paid freely because of his great love for us. And again, just buying us that freedom to worship him and to experience him here today. And communion actually started with Jesus. He was with his 12 closest followers. And they were at the table. He lifted up a loaf of bread and he broke it. And he said to them, "This bread represents my body, broken for you. Take and eat, and whenever you do this, remember me." Let's go ahead and take the bread. In the same way, Jesus lifted his cup and he said to them, "This cup represents my blood spilled for you. Take and drink, and whenever you do this, remember me." Go ahead and take the cup. And as we often do when we participate in communion together, I just want to give us a moment to just meet with God, whether that's in prayer. Just take a moment to just reflect on his great love for us. Let's do that together now. So now with God's love fresh on our minds, we're going to sing another song together and just pour out our praise directly to him, pour out our thanks directly to him. So we sing this out with us. You know, as we sing this song, we're just going to give God all of our praise. Just read along with the words. And let these words just be an anthem from the depth of our hearts for our thanks and praise for all he's done.
All my words fall short. I've got nothing new. How could I express all my gratitude? I could sing these songs as I often do, but every song must end, and you never do. So I throw up my hands and praise you again and again, 'cause all that I have is a hallelujah. Except for a heart singing hallelujah, hallelujah. I've got one response. I've got just one move. With my arms stretched wide, I will worship you. So I throw up my hands and praise you again and again, 'cause all that I have is a hallelujah, hallelujah.
Thanks for being with us today. If you enjoyed this service, please share it with our friend. Give this video the thumbs up on YouTube, and please make sure to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss a thing. And make sure to join us next week as we continue and conclude our series, Ambushed. Thanks for being here today.